Hi, this is Scott Garibay. I got a hot one for you today. Here we go. Let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition honoring Gary Gygax. Woo! Listen to this. Man, I swear if you wrote this stuff in a novel, the stuff that's happening today, if you wrote it in a novel, people wouldn't believe it. They'd just like, that's too outlandish. All right. Does Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition honor Gary Gygax? It's a complicated question, right? A long time ago, I said right on this channel, I was like, hey, Gary Gygax's name is in every 5e book. Of course they honor him. That is not the case. His name is not in every book. And they list like a bunch of old heads like Ed Greenwood and like just like if you even scrawled, 4 things in the original Saltmarsh, your name's up in a 5e book honored, right? But Gary Gygax, the guy who created Dungeons and Dragons, where's he mentioned in 5e? So it gets complicated, right? Now, I see a steady rhythm of honoring of Gary Gygax in progressiveness. I believe that there's an intellectual battle today. It's just purely an intellectual battle between the OSR and D&D 5e community, right? And OSR is like, Gary wasn't progressive, right? He was very conservative. He was based like us, right? And 5e is like, nah, Gary was very progressive. Did you see Diana the Acrobat in the 1980s cartoon, right? Did you see that he made Lorraine Williams the first and only president of a tabletop role-playing game company, right? Like, he has a history of progressiveness, right? And so, but there's this debate, right? And so previously, before 2 weeks ago, there was a debate on whether 5e, Dungeons & Dragons 5e, the current edition, honored Gary Gygax. But that debate is over. You want to know why? Sequencing and timing. Okay? Now, if you look at every single Dungeons & Dragons source book, I'm not sure you're going to find Gary Gygax's name listed in a single one. Right? I own them all, and I haven't seen it. Right? And his exclusion is huge. Right? Now, why? Okay, so I love Wizards of the Coast. I love Gary Gygax. How do I feel about D&D leaving his name out of every book in 5th edition? I don't like that, right? That's bad, right? However, I look at like Strixhaven and I'm like, that's Gary Gygax at the core, right? Something new, something fresh, something innovative, really taking the game in new, Dungeons and Dragons into new direction, right? All that's Gygax. Gygax was disruptive and innovative, right? And like, the 2 men go into magical prom, right? That's all Gary, man. He was super progressive, right? Like, he was very progressive. And that's why he was able to build Dungeons & Dragons, because he wasn't stuck with stodgy old ideas from, crusty 1950s and 60s wargaming. He's like, let's smash the mold, man. Let's take this in new directions and go new, innovative, progressive, inclusive, go into inclusive new ways. That's why he made sure that when he showed you a Dungeons and Dragons, player group in the 1980s cartoon, that it was diverse. It was diverse across gender. It was diverse across race, right? We don't know if it was diverse across orientation. Possibly, we don't know. That was less of an issue back then. It was just the LGBTQ discussion was really emerging then. So we don't really know if he was progressive from that perspective, but he was certainly progressive from everything that was on the table for progression at the time, right? So Gary was incredibly progressive, right? Now, why would Wizards of the Coast do this? Why would they not directly honor Gygax? Well, they're in a tough spot, okay? Because here's the reality is, Gary Gygax died in 2008, right? And the reality is, Wizards of the Coast owns Dungeons & Dragons, right? And a lot of fans of Gary Gygax, the first, creator of Dungeons & Dragons, they're very grognard, they're very based, very conservative generally, right? That's a problem for Wizards of the Coast because they're very progressive, very inclusive, right? It's important to them, right? And so they don't want to upset old fans, right? But they also don't want to upset, like, literally low millions of new fans coming in from sources like Matthew Mercer's Critical Role, right? They want to kind of stand in the middle, right? And the reality is, Gygax is, for them it's tough because they own the intellectual property, but they don't own Gary Gygax's legacy. right? So and in many ways, Gary Gygax's legacy owns every edition of Dungeons and Dragons, right? The moment Gary is completely disconnected from Dungeons and Dragons, it'll no longer be Dungeons and Dragons, right? Nobody's gonna care. Like nobody would care about Disney completely disconnected from Walt Disney, right? Like the creator matters, right? So previously there was I could see very clear honoring of Gary even without his name listed in the books, but a lot of people couldn't, right? They're like, hey, I want to see his real name attached to real D&D 5e stuff, right? Official content, right? Well, I got it for you, right? And this world don't sleep, things change quick, right? All right, so here we go. How is Gary Gygax officially connected to D&D 5e with 5e saying his name flat out, right? Well, here's the answer. Joe Manganiello, that dude played Deathstroke in the DC area. He was in the movie Rampage with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He is married to the guy who played the lady who played one of the wives in Modern Family. And that's a huge, like, that thing was on for 11 years. Like, she's massively rich, right? Joe Manganiello, there's a D&D Beyond video on YouTube where Joe Manganiello goes, "This is my Gary Gygax memorial game room." That's nice, right? A year ago, oh, that's nice. D&D Beyond honored Gary Gygax. That's not Wizards of the Coast officially honoring Gary Gygax, right? That's not official. That's official today. Did you catch it? Did you see it? Did you see the sequencing? Right? Wizards of the Coast owns D&D Beyond now. D&D Beyond is officially part of Wizards of the Coast, an official fat red D&D icon, right? That video with Gary Gygax's name bolted straight to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition content because there's no division now, right? D&D Beyond is owned by Hasbro, right? So that takes that official Gary Gygax recognition as the creator of Dungeons & Dragons and bolts it directly to 5e, right? And if they wanted to stop it, they could have taken that video down. They could have said, hey, no, we're not officially connecting Gary Gygax to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition day because it's problematic. We're the owners. He's the creator. There's some friction that happened in the 1986, blah, 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 right? But now it's official. You can't say that D&D 5e doesn't officially acknowledge Gary Gygax. It officially does. And guess what? Todd Kenrick, the guy who's talking to Joe Manganiello, was a D&D Beyond employee then, but he's quite literally a Wizards of the Coast employee now, right? He worked for D&D Beyond, he quit, and then he was hired by Wizards of the Coast. So literally, this video quite literally has a Wizards of the Coast employee talking directly about Gary Gygax as the creator of Dungeons & Dragons. So bringing it to the point where every single edition links directly, officially, canonically, straight back to Gary Gygax, right? And it is complicated because you would only understand this new canon, right, if you understood the industry of Dungeons and Dragons and the sequencing of ownership of D&D Beyond. It's pretty incredible, right? But this is Wizards of the Coast officially acknowledging Gary Gygax's connection to the game, and so any kind of and the OSR. And, I get it, right? Their stuff is, like, utterly trounced in the market and in the mind and hearts of players and dungeon masters all over the world every single day. Like, and they're like, well, we really like D&D and we really like D&D copy. Oh, yeah. And they lose left and right. They just lose left and right, right? And here it is again. They're saying, well, 5e really doesn't honor Gygax. Here it is. That's official. That's as official as it gets. All right, like right there. Gary Gygax, D&D 5e, all together, all official, all connected. All right. That's my opinion. Love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.